obviously there were a number of things that were wrong with that whole thing. Is even the questions, right, that Todd Blanche was asking her. Describe the nature of your relationship from 1990 until his death, right? Why? What does that have to do with anything, right? I thought they were going there to talk about the people who had participated in this thing. And he basically just had her tell a story. How did you meet him? How did Jeffrey get into business? She was like giving hearsay testimony about what Jeffrey Epstein was doing at Bear Stearns and the Dalton School. You wouldn't do that in court. You wouldn't go in there and ask a witness in court to give a hearsay description of like what somebody did before they knew the person. Like, come on, man. It was ridiculous. And then he was like finishing her sentences and you know, like leading her to certain answers. The obvious purpose of Todd Blanche going there was he was going there to get Ghislaine Maxwell to put a specific version of Jeffrey Epstein and those events down. See, whatever they found in the files, right? Think about what happened leading up to this, guys. Okay, leading up to this, when they decided to bury the files, Donald Trump said, we're trying to go through and ascertain what is credible. Okay? So there's a whole bunch of shit in there in those files that they want to be not credible. So what they did was they have like the indictment and the court case against Ghislaine Maxwell. There's grand jury testimony. There's the investigation of Ghislaine Maxwell. All of that is down out in the world. It exists on hard copy, in files, in PDF documents. So now they came in here and she gave a version of all of that stuff that it was very different, I'm sure, than the information they have from her indictment, her case, and all those other investigations. So now they have a competing document of Ghislaine's interview, supposedly the mastermind, the inside person that's giving an account of Epstein and what went on that probably refutes like 30 or 40% of what's in the Epstein files. So that was on purpose. They wanted to create something that refutes everything they want to call not credible. Okay? So now every way that Ghislaine Maxwell's interview like diverges from what is in the Epstein files, they're going to make the claim that what's in the Epstein files is not credible, that Ghislaine's account is the real one. But see, here's the problem, guys, is they, like, it wasn't under oath. It wasn't videotaped like normal depositions are videotaped, okay? They're videotaped, right? There's no videotape. There's some audio recordings. They were talking off camera before that. You don't do that in depositions. It's like you hit record, you do the deposition, you hit stop. That's it. This shit was all spliced up, and they were talking before. They were talking on breaks, right? They were like, we don't know what was going on in the room. The whole thing just stinks to high heaven. But it was all to create a narrative that ostensibly is assigning a whole bunch of blame onto this, you know, dead girl. And trying to like exonerate Ghislaine or lay a foundation of him being able to pardon her. And they're like, well, look at her testimony. She didn't really do anything. I mean, you know, it was purposeful. Like they did that on purpose. They did that on purpose. And she had notes. Okay. Remember how he met with her? And then she went back to the jail cell with that like postal bin, okay, before this interview or whatever, or like she had notes, you know what I mean? Like they like, I think they asked her to prepare a fucking statement for this thing, you know? Yeah, they relitigated the case for propaganda. Exactly. That is well said. That's well said.
So on the indictment, for example, it says, from at least on or about 1994 up to and including at least in or about 1997, Maxwell assisted, facilitated, and contributed to Jeffrey Epstein's abuse of girls by, among other things, helping Epstein to recruit and ultimately abuse victims known to Maxwell and Epstein to be the age of 18. The victims were as young as 15 years old, and when they were and abused by Maxwell and Epstein, both of whom knew that certain victims were in fact the age of 18. In other words, you don't have deniability here. Now, in another place it says, Maxwell, quote, in an effort to conceal her crimes, she repeatedly lied when questioned about her conduct, including in relation to some of the minor victims
perjury
described herein when providing testimony under oath in 2016. The government charged her with perjury because of the lies she told, the alleged lies she told in 2016. A prosecutor at the time said that he had no interest in talking to her, no interest in talking about cooperation. That was the Justice Department before the Injustice Department of Trump and Blanche and others.
Yeah. So in other words, when they first litigated this shit, she committed perjury, and that's why they stopped talking to her, because she was lying. And yes, she did not testify in her own case.
Now, the next page that I think is interesting is Maxwell and Epstein's victims. And again, we're still looking at the indictment. It says between approximately in or about 1994 and in or about 1997, and do suffer, there is some repetition among prosecutors. I know, I was one of those guys. The defendant facilitated Jeffrey Epstein's access to victims by, among other things, inducing and enticing and aiding and abetting the inducement and enticement of multiple victims. Victims were groomed and or abused at multiple locations. And how they were was they'd be taken out shopping, they'd be given gifts, we're going to help you with your career, we're going to do all sorts of things.
We're going to pay for your college. That's what they did with Annie Farmer.
Because there was a woman around, it didn't make other adults suspicious.
Now, I want to add something here, guys, from this book that I'm reading about Sarah Ransome. And Sarah Ransome was one of the women who she was a little older than the others, but Sarah Ransome was one of the ones that was held captive at the island for long stretches. But Sarah Ransome said something that was really interesting, and it was the real power of Ghislaine, because Ghislaine came from a very, very upper class family, like extraordinarily upper class. Okay, Robert Maxwell, they had a yacht. They had lots of money, private planes. She was very upper class. She was very graced in etiquette and the rules of society. And so what was interesting to hear Sarah Ransome talk about it was how Ghislaine Maxwell won over all these girls, because the girls that were picked were from the other side of the tracks. They were from trailer parks. They were from lower middle class homes. And Ghislaine Maxwell dressed really well. She was fashionable. She was high society. She spoke with her sort of British, almost royalty sounding accent. She was very elegant and aristocratic in a way that these girls were just taken in by her. They were like, oh my God, she's like a high society girl. She's like a princess. And so these troubled girls were so won over by Ghislaine, because she was so eloquent and so aristocratic, sort of loving, nurturing, kind of high society, motherly type, that they didn't consider her to be harmful at all. Yeah, she was safe. She was somebody to look up to. They aspired to her. You know what I mean? They aspired to be like her. And so she used that to win their trust and to win their adoration and their the way they looked up to her as a leader and somebody who was going to take care of them and teach them the ways of high society, how to fit in with the models and the stars and, you know, the royalty, you know, the Prince Andrew, you know what I mean? And then she fucked them all over, right? She was like the predator of all predators that came in being like the safe, squeaky clean, like I'm so good and like wondrous and like such a royal type person that I'm going to protect you from everybody. And then she was literally knifing them in the back at every opportunity. And it's like so manipulative. Okay. It is like so manipulative. It's like really, really unnerving. And it is similar to cult leaders. And it's similar to the things that like predatory politicians or business leaders do, right? When you go, right? When people would go and you meet the head of a studio, this guy's running the whole show. Everybody's lives are in the head of the studio. You go have a meeting with him and surely he's going to take care of you. Everybody's looking at him. He's the safest guy there, right? He's the guy that has to watch his behavior, but no, he's the sneakiest, most down and dirty, manipulative, right? That's the way it was, man. She was just so deceitful. She set them up and won their trust and let them all put her on a pedestal of like, she's going to guide them and take care of them. And then she turned on them all and was so, I think, it's the way Sarah Ransome put it too, that she was like cold and completely unfeeling, right? She had no problem if her behavior was just going to completely devastate those young girls. She just did not care. She did not see them as human or as like, you know what I mean? They were trash to her completely.
Children were probably too young to declare what was going on, humiliated and embarrassed. We often hear, particularly in cases, and it takes years and years for people to come forward. So, and the indictment has pictures and it has more details, but I'm trying to do this in a summary fashion because this background is important to consider what the devil the interview was with Maxwell by Blanche. So, in and around 2016, in the context of a deposition as part of civil litigation, Maxwell, the defendant, repeatedly provided false and perjurious statements under oath regarding, among other subjects, her role in facilitating the abuse of minor victims by Jeffrey Epstein, including some of the specific events and acts of abuse detailed below. Okay,
so what he's talking about is in the way Ghislaine Maxwell went is when Jeffrey was originally arrested in 2007, 2006, in that first thing, Ghislaine Maxwell was not in those proceedings, okay? She was earlier in the 90s, okay? By the time they busted Jeffrey Palm Beach, it was like Sarah Kellen, Adriana Ross, and Leslie Groff, and Nadia Marcinkova, okay? Then Epstein gets busted in 2005. And then Ghislaine Maxwell is still there, but she was not like involved with setting up the girls. Those lower lieutenants, if you will, were handling the girls themselves. But what happened is Ghislaine got civilly sued after Jeffrey got let off. And that's what she was being deposed for in 2016, okay, was this civil suit. And that's where she committed perjury and got caught lying and shit like that. And then by the time they came back and prosecuted her after Epstein died, they no longer sought to even get testimony from her because they knew that she was like a completely unreliable witness. It was Virginia Giuffre sued Ghislaine Maxwell in September 2015 for defamation. Okay, so Virginia Giuffre came out with comments about abuse, and then Maxwell commented about Virginia Giuffre, and then Virginia sued her for defamation and accused her then of recruiting and grooming and a person known as Jane Doe number 3. So Maxwell publicly called And then Virginia Giuffre sued her for defamation. And then the case was settled. And it led to unsealing of thousands of documents and Maxwell's deposition, which is what he's talking about. So it was the process of Virginia suing for defamation that I think unlocked all the documents that later allowed the government to prosecute Ghislaine Maxwell. So that is pretty fucking crazy, dude. Extensive discovery, various third parties. Oh, and that's where Julie Brown, those were the documents that led to Julie K. Brown reopening this case. So, dude, it's crazy. If Virginia hadn't filed that suit, and if they hadn't gone through the discovery of that suit, like Julie K. Brown would have probably not cracked this thing in 2019. Dude, that's crazy to think that like Virginia Giuffre is probably almost single-handedly responsible for opening the floodgates on this thing, man. That is wild. What is up, guys? Thank you so much for watching. You like the video, you want to support independent resistance media, you know what to do. Drop that sub, hit the like button, and please share it. And we do love our members, so if you want to become a member, it's another really great way to support. Thanks again for everything, guys. I'll see you next time. Let's go.